Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Hope you had a good break. And so I like to think of us here at this conference as sharing the ocean waters of the world together as we dip in and track our tides, etc. Well, I can't think of anyone who knows the oceans of the world and tides better than our next presenter, Prue Jeffries. As a professional surfer, Prue has traveled the world enjoying many peoples and cultures. She trained and coached for over 30 years internationally and then moved into a busy full-time bodywork and wellness practice. She's a continuum teacher, biodynamic craniosacral therapy teacher, a registered somatic movement educator, a certified massage therapist, and an RCST. She's also creative director for Watermark Arts, an endeavor that supports art inspired by Continuum and somatic practices. Being with the ocean, nature, and the creative flow of life informs Prue deeply. She is deeply passionate about the transformative potential of nature and art. Prue combines all of this for Body of Wonder, which is her website, bodyofwonder.com, and where she offers practitioner trainings, workshops, retreats, and classes that explore wholeness and health. Welcome, Prue. Over to you.
Thank you, Jan. And I just wanted to say hi to everybody and also thank the association for inviting me to present today. And of course, I want to pay my respects to the land that I'm living in, which was originally inhabited by the Kumeyaay peoples here in Encinitas. And I'd also like to pay my respects to the land my family lives in at the moment in Australia, which was originally inhabited by the Yuin peoples. So just a little moment to pay my respects there and for all of us to appreciate this. So today I'm going to be doing a presentation called The Fluidity of the Midline and exploring the three centers. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about craniosacral work, embryology, and combining that with Continuum. But seeing as we all came back from a break and some of us in the field know Continuum and some of us not so much are familiar, I'm just going to bring us into a small, quick tutorial on the 4 sounds that we'll be using today. And for anyone unfamiliar with Continuum, so I'll just do a little teaser of that and then we can put it in our basket and then we'll bring it out during the presentation. So one of the first sounds of Continuum is a sh sound, and it's not an unfamiliar sound to all of us. It's a very easy sound to make, and it's basically the type of sound you'd make if someone's little baby was sleeping and you needed to. So we can all just practice this together, and as we make the sh sound, we do it on the out breath and we can do it on a longer exhalation. So the idea with Continuum is to create these breaths and sounds to vibrate our fluids and our tissues and create a greater connection to our internal sensory experience. So we can just do that, and it doesn't have to be rhythmic. The whole idea is the sounds bring you further into your body and further into your listening ability. So I can demonstrate the shh, and then if you'd all like to do this with me as I go along, that would be great. So. And with Continuum, the place where we're not making the sounds, but we start to deeply listen, we call that open attention. And open attention is this deep listening to what wants to emerge inside us. So it could be that a little movement starts to emerge and we might not know where that movement's going to go, and we just be with and follow that movement. Sometimes it's not an outward movement, just like craniosacral, it might be just listening to those deep inner stirrings. So it could appear very still from the external, but with Continuum, there's a whole range of experience with our movements that we explore in open attention. Okay, so that's the first sound, the sh. And the second sound is a hum. So again, it's not an unfamiliar sound to everybody. It's just like we would make humming along to a tune. And again, it's the same principles of doing the hum on the out breath and no forcing. It's all with ease, and it's doing it with your ability to just listen to yourself and your own internal rhythms. So I'll demonstrate one or two and then you can hum along with me. It's So the hum has this biomorphic quality, and we usually do it in a lower tone, most of the sounds in Continuum. So when you're ready, we can just do a little bit of humming along together. Hum. Then just take a few moments in open attention. It's also a place where we get to appreciate the vast and wide range our organismic being can inhabit. So the next sound we're going to be learning today is an O, and the fourth sound is also an O, but in the Continuum lexicon there's some variations of O's. It's quite a large lexicon of sounds. So the first O is again just like making the vowel sound of an O, and it's not like the Om. A lot of people commonly confuse it with the Om of yoga, but there's no M on the end. It's just an open vowed O. So I'll do a couple sounds of it, and just join along with me as we go. And don't stress about getting it right. It's not about that. And I might take some few moments, a few breaths in open attention. And then we're going to do the second variation. It's called a puffed O, and it's the O sound, but we blow out our cheeks like, so it's like a puffer fish, like blowing out its cheeks. Another way to describe it is you might want to pretend you're blowing out the candles on a birthday cake for yourself. So you just, but you're creating the O vibration at the same time. So, and it's a very relaxed, there's not a lot of pressure on the O with the cheeks. So, but it's a neurally rich sound to make because we're vibrating the lips and actually the meridians, the major meridians here too. So I'll do a few demo breaths and then you can follow with me. And just a few moments in open attention. So we're going to put those 4 sounds to the side, and I'm going to be bringing them in as I present today about the fluidity of the midline. So the fluidity of the midline, exploring the 3 centers. So we've got a theme for this conference. It's about change and embracing change. So what that means to me is that it puts us immediately in the flux of life and changes the nature of life's emergent and evolutionary properties. With change is metamorphosis. So what can that mean for all of us as biodynamic craniosacral therapists and as practitioners? Well, we're working with metamorphosis under our hands in every moment, actually. And sometimes we're aware of it, sometimes we're not. This image of the butterfly I have here is always a beautiful reminder of a very easy metamorphosis to watch and appreciate. But for us in biodynamics, we're working with embryology under our hands, and we're working with it in the field also. So embryology's, we can study it and see how all these forces are informing us and creating us. And those forces that inform us are emergent properties. The great physicist David Bohm, whose theory on wholeness, the implicit and explicit order, speaks to this in many ways. And this whole flowing movement of life, this enfolding into what is implicit and underneath everything, and then this unfolding from the implicit to become explicit. So embryology is us as humans becoming more explicit. And in the David Bohm understanding, this is this one flowing movement, and a way to conceptualize this is quite like an infinity symbol is a way to bring some sort of a concept to it, although it's not all of it. David Bohm says the enfolded order is a vast range of potentiality which can be unfolded. So in this, what am I saying about the midline? Well, there's many, many midlines, but the midline I'm centering this in today is what is sometimes considered the original midline or the true midline, which is dynamic stillness. And that is that implicit ground of emergence. And from that emergence is wholeness in its deepest sense. But dynamic stillness is that timeless, internal, beyond change in form, beyond causality, yet it unfolds and emerges, and through that time, change, gravity, everything exists unfolded. And as practitioners, we're working with this stillness, and we're contacting this stillness that is an explicit revelation when we can feel and sense it of a greater, deeper mystery. So in that sense, change is a function of wholeness. It's an explicit function of wholeness. So that's where we're going today. So how can we study this in the body? And in the tradition of biodynamic craniosacral therapy, a great contribution to understanding embryology, and there's many different viewpoints on embryology all around, but this is a good biodynamic approach to embryology. Really helps us understand the movements and the spatial coordinations that are going on to create us. And we're working with these movements. So it's a lens studying the dynamics and formative forces of growth expressed by living cells. And Erich Blechschmidt, which is the founder and creator of the biodynamic approach to embryology, says it's where biomechanical principles are applied to the constantly changing form of the embryo and its ensembles of living cells. So in this approach, it's not just biomechanics, it's the marriage of biomechanics, biodynamics, and biokinetics as we're forming. So the biodynamic forces that informed us continue to do so throughout our lives. So change is constantly happening because we're constantly being informed. So as practitioners, how can we embody this? How can this create us to be better practitioners? And as I mentioned earlier, as biodynamic therapists, we're working with the embryology under our hands, and not just under our hands, in our own system, in our own bodies, and everyone and every being we relate to. We are embryology unfolding. In some ways, we could say the earth is this giant cell, and we're this giant cell with the earth unfolding. So it's worthwhile for us to have our own embodied sense as practitioners of these forces before we touch into the creative forces that orchestrate the lives of our clients. So in saying all of this, we've got this change in embryology, then we must name that we're a process. And Eileen, are you? There's a hand up. Okay, I'll leave it. So Continuum sees us as a process, an ongoing inquiry. So there's no end point. There's no teleological end point. It's an ongoing inquiry, and us humans are actually an extension of the earth, and we're a process that's billions of years old, and we're still unfolding. And this, in my sense, is what evolution means. With biodynamic approach to embryology, it's a little more specific, a little bit different context, but we've got this similar understanding of process. The body is a process of form and forming, of spatial and developmental movements in time. So that's paraphrasing Erich Blechschmidt with Brian Freeman, Dr. Brian Freeman's translation of him. So then we come back to, what does the fluidity of the midline have to do with change, evolution, and embryology? Everything. So this is a quote from David Bohm again. Harmony is seen to be possible only if the worldview itself takes part in an unending process of development, evolution, and unfoldment, which fits as part of the universal process that is the ground of all existence. So the dynamic stillness, the midline, this is what we've got here. So in order to come to the dynamic stillness and how that informs us as a midline, it's important to come back to wholeness and in an embodied sense. And in order to look at wholeness, we can't overlook, we have to start with the ova. So I have a little image of an ova here, and basically what the ova is saying is, by Brian Freeman, subdivision of a living whole entity, a totally integrated ovum we start with, and therefore everything that results from it must be totally integrated because it's arising from subdivision of an existing whole. So I can't really, we don't have space to do this today, but that's very in line with understandings of fractals. And if anyone's not familiar with fractals, a little Dr. Google can help there. So also when we're talking of the ova and we're talking of wholeness, totipotency comes into this. And we all love potency and craniosacral. So what does this mean on a cellular level? It means producing a mature organism requires the ability to both generate all the cells of the body and to organize them in a specific temporal and spatial sequence. That is, to undergo a coordinated process of development. Totipotency in this strictest sense is demonstrated by the ability of an isolated cell to produce a fertile adult individual. Consequently, a cell that is totipotent is also a one-cell embryo. That is, a cell that is capable of generating a globally coordinated developmental sequence. So from the moment we're an ova, we can do anything, which is very exciting. When we talk of totipotency and wholeness, we can't tease out integration as separate from this. They're married together. So integration, how does it come that we are so wonderfully integrated? The reality is we're never not integrated. From fertilization onwards, we're always a totally interacting, integrated whole in all our cells, in all our parts, because we arose from subdivision of a whole. So that's pretty profound to feel that in ourselves and to realize that's our original state and what we've emerged from. And in this drawing here, we've got the single cell, the ova, the embryo, the zona pellucida, into 2. I can't count, I think it's into 8. And then there's the change into a blastocyst, an expanded blastocyst. So this is all blooming and happening. This is how we come into being. So I'm obviously a fan of David Bohm, everybody, but there is a universal flux that cannot be defined explicitly, but which can be known only implicitly. So maybe we can't conceptualize or define it, but we can, on a deep, deep level, have a felt sense of this. It doesn't need to be linear and it doesn't need to be rational. So we're going to do a little continuum exploration. I'm just going to come out of the slide. I had that guy there. He was a Vitruvian man, Vitruvian being. He'd gone a little oceanic and a little tiger bird-like, and then the earth. But we're going to play with this concept. We have our skin, and for reasons of boundaries, we know we end here, and we have a biofield that also helps with our perceptions into the world. We're going to put our hands out and get a sense of this vast space, this biofield surrounding us. And maybe we're going to sense that there's a zona pellucida just cocooning us. And then we're going to bring the puffed O's into our cellular being, and we're going to work with the movements that arise there. So I'll start demoing, and I just come along with me as you feel ready. A little fluid within the fluids, the air that our arms are suspended in is actually a potent space, being surrounded by this zona pellucida. And then spend a few moments in open attention, appreciating your potency and anything else that's arisen. Okay, so moving along here. We've gone from this transformation of a blastocyst now into what's called sometimes a bilaminar disc or a bilaminar blastocyst. Disc isn't really the right term. It doesn't really give justice to this fluid primordial substance that we are right now, intelligent primordial substance. But as a bilaminar blastocyst, we start to have 3 fluid regions be defined and 2 cell layers, which are the ectoderm and the endoderm. So this is a little bit of an easier schematic. You can see the 3 fluid regions, so the amniotic sac or cavity, the yolk sac, or the chorionic cavity. In the Blechschmidt work, the names are a little different, but I wanted to land on the general terms to center us a little. But what's to understand is this is a shaped protoplasm it's becoming. So there's fluid and there's liquid, but there's also this shaped protoplasm starting to develop with these cell layers. And it's gel-like, it's elastic, and it's very fluid. Basically, if you understand with Continuum, we work like this with the gel soul. So the cell can become gel, and it's aware of its boundaries, and it's this jelly-like consistency. And then when it wants to move and stream, it becomes soul. So it expands, it starts moving. So gel, soul. So that's that interplay of the cellular fluidity. So what is a protoplasm? It's a ground substance of life. It's responsible for all living processes. The strict definition of protoplasm is the cytoplasm, nucleus, and organelles of a cell. So here's a little drawing just showing a schematic of a protoplasm. So we're probably, most of us in the biodynamic field, being familiar with the protoplasm of a slime mold. That's many protoplasms joined together and moving, many single cell, single nucleus protoplasms united as one being. And we are protoplasmic. If we didn't have protoplasm within us, our capacities to regenerate and innovate and change would be severely impaired. So this protoplasm, this ground substance of life, actually in many religious traditions has great reverence and respect, actually. So now we're going to do a little continuum protoplasmic streaming of the gel soul. So we're going to be the protoplasm, the fluid, almost jelly-like, but not quite. protoplasm that I've got here. And we're going to be using O's as we become fluid, protoplasmic-like. And then we're going to move into Sh as we become liquid. So we're going to sense into our protoplasmic selves and our primordial selves. And I'm going to conceptualize and visualize and imagine as I do the O's that I'm this protoplasmic gel, and then I'm going to turn into this streaming fluid. So it'll look like this. Feeling into my protoplasmic self, my ingenious protoplasmic self that's shapeless, that can take on any shape or form. Then I might want to become a little more liquid. And then I'm going to bring in the as I become more liquid. Becoming more soul-like. And then back to gel. And then I might bring myself into open attention, deep listening. And even as a protoplasm, I can connect to that dynamic stillness. Even without a vertebral body, I've still got a midline because I know where I am. When you just can, we're going to come back to the presentation. So the midline, the dynamic stillness, dynamic and alive at the heart of everything enfolded within all of life. We're very big on central and decentralized today, but dynamic stillness doesn't, it inhabits, it's not polarity, it inhabits everything. So it's central. We can have a direct experience of its presence clinically and within ourselves, or it's decentralized also. It's omnipresent, implicit, enfolded in all existence. So it's not just our own midline or stillness, and it doesn't belong to us. We belong to the stillness. So this is our belonging in our home. So wholeness is an expression of stillness, implicit in life, yet explicit in the deeper unknowing. It holds the essence of all form. And in that sense, the midline, the dynamic stillness is not affected by conditional forces, doesn't lesion. It is health. And actually, the word health originates from the Anglo-Saxon term hail, and that term actually meant wholeness. So there's a direct connection to health and wholeness, and this is what we're feeling into and can inform us in all ways in life. So the original midline, the dynamic stillness, everything that emerges from that is actually an effect or a function of the midline. So all the other midlines we talk about are an effect or a function of the original midline. So we have, as a blastocyst and as we turn into an embryonic disc, we've got this fluid within the fluid and this vibration and these waveforms happening. We have potency and then ignition. And from that potency and ignition into the disc space, we have a bioelectric field that emerges from the ignition. And so sometimes we call this bioelectric field a midline too, and it is, but it's a function and an effect of the original stillness, and it emerges out of that stillness. So the bioelectric field is in a wrapping. It's a wrapping around the stillness. And within the embryology, within the embryonic disc, and we're going to get into this ahead, the primitive streak emerges. And from the primitive streak, there's all this folding and growing, and a nodal caudal midline emerges. And that also is a cellular wrapping. It's a cellular wrapping around the electromagnetic field or the electromagnetic midline, which is wrapped around the stillness. And from the motor cord, the vertebral midline emerges. So midline's also sort of, it's not the greatest term for what's occurring here. It's hard to bring in concepts, but I like my little shells. It's still only 3D, so it's hard to get in the dimensionality. So here's a little creature spiraling into the stillness or out of the stillness, but appreciating a midline. So this embryonic disc I'm talking about, that's emerging from the blastocyst disc, there's an event that happens, and within the center of the disc is the vibration, the fluid within the fluids. So if I do it with some continuum sounds, there's this vibration. The gel, the fluids, all this ground substance and the water and every fluids are moving and there's vibration. This potential that becomes anything. So from the vibration, comes the potency, comes the ignition, comes the bioelectric field that emerges as the effect of the midline. So this is the event, and this is the disc that this is happening within. And it's basically moved on from the bilaminar blastocyst that it was, it's starting to turn into a trilaminar blastocyst. So this gel-like life substance that has all the potential undifferentiated is starting to take form. And within bioethicists, with embryology these days, this is where they have all, to this degree, landed that we start our individual life. So it's a very important event in many ways. And just a little thing about protoplasm again, it comes from the word protos first, plasma, thing formed. So this diagram's a diagram from Erich Blechschmidt, and it's a cut-off section of this endocyst disc. And basically, you're starting to see up here is what's called an expansion dome, and that's coming towards us. So we have this little connection, this little stalk to our mother's lining, and some of the tissues creating a level of boundary and restriction. So the flow is a lot faster and unimpeded up in the higher region here. So this starts to grow more rapidly, and we're getting this folding, this expansion disc towards us. And this midlines emerge, this primitive groove or streak, it's often called. And there's a primitive pit. But what's created is this rolling rim where this depression's happened, and on the top's expanding over, folding, almost spiral-like, and then below is an impansion pit. So that's folding inwards. If I was to take this and take it from the side, you'd see it folding on the top and folding this way, so like an S, and then they keep folding. So there's this wrapping, this spiraling occurring. So this is a side view of that endocyst disc that has emerged from the blastocyst. And here we can see it's clearly a 3-chambered conceptus now, moving into an embryo. We're in the transition zone. This is a chorionic sac. This is the amniotic sac, and preventral is the chorionic in the Blechschmidt terms. Amniotic is called dorsal. The ventral or the yolk sac is here. But here's our so-called disc or our protoplasm. This is us. We're surrounded by these fluids. And this is very dynamic. We're moving, we're bending, we're curving, we're arcing, double arcing, triple arcing. There's inflections, there's waveforms occurring at all times in this conceptus that's moving into an embryo. So just a little schematic on the primitive streak. Its appearance marks a transition from conceptus to embryo. As I mentioned earlier, it emerges from the dynamic stillness, from the bioelectric field. So cranial, where the expansion pit's occurring, caudal, for want of a better term, where the impansion pit. But here's this primitive streak, and there's folding coming laterally too from this center that's emerging, this midline. Here's another schematic showing the primitive groove, primitive pit, and what's called a primitive node, and the notochord, which starts our whole vertebral formation, and our whole orientation starts to emerge on top of that pit and groove. So this is another sliced out version to see that not only is the folding happening over, it's happening laterally, and the trilaminar starts to come in. We're not just ectoderm or endoderm anymore. It's folding together and creating mesoderm also. So there's all this spiraling happening and folding and unfolding. So it creates these 3 germ layers, and the entirety of who we are arises from these 3 germ layers: the mesoderm, the endoderm, the ectoderm. We arise from the relationship of these 3 layers, moving against, around, and within each other in relationship with the three fluid regions, the amnion, the yolk sac, and the chorion. So even this drawing, we're seeing waveforms. Just it's primary to life, as Continuum would say. But again, we can go back to the stillness that this is all coming from. So as these midlines are created, we can look at what's called the axial process, because I've talked about the three centers today. And clearly dynamic stillness is the center. But as we form, there's, in some areas of embryology, it's always different levels of agreement on these things. But from the primitive streak is a form that takes shape is called an axial process. And as far as tissue, it's an extension of the ectoderm, or the inner disc that you saw folding and rolling. So we have the primitive streak, and I couldn't get a drawing of the axial process, but basically where this notochordal process is, the axial process is laying down. And what people that have studied it have said is that it's quite still. It's, relatively speaking, it's quiescent as far as movement and metabolic activity. So it acts as an sort of like a still point within our formation. Some people go on to say it's the apex of the axial process that's a center or a null point for all of the developmental movements of the endocyst or the embryo. So for many people, it has a lot of importance. That axial process will turn into, or the notochord will emerge from it. So this is after the axial process has somewhat transformed or being transformed here. And on top of that, you can see the schematic with the neural plate that the notochord starts to fold under at later stages. This is all the midline developing. So this is a side view. We go back to that S turn, as I was talking about, to feel all this rolling, folding, and folding, unfolding, all these undulations occurring. This is the top, the expansion domes rolling here. And that's that rolling rim, right where I was talking about the primitive groove or primitive pit. So it's rolling under it as it grows so fast with the speed. And this impansion pit's coming up from the primitive streak, and it's rolling upwards, it's pushing upwards and growing upwards. So the axial process is emerging upwards and elongating. And then as it meets the expansion dome at this, its still point, they're folding in and of each other. So these are, again, primary movements of life. And in some sense, we can sense these under our hands when we're deeply connecting with our clients, and we can feel these in our body too. So here's another nature form with all the rolling and unfolding. What I can say about this is if I'm in that center of that wave, there's a stillness, and all that force is moving around me. And in that stillness, I'm still moving forward. And I have a lot more speed in my stillness, actually. So it's sort of a paradox, but if you see paradoxes. So here we have a nice nautilus showing again how nature rolls and folds and unfolds. So we're going to do a little continuum exploration of the rolling and the folding. So I'm just going to stop the share. And what we can do is we're going to imagine ourselves rolling, folding forward. And then maybe we'll roll and fold back when we feel like it. We might roll and fold to the side. We might roll and fold to the other way, whatever takes our fancy. But we're going to be using the sh sound to roll and fold and become this very creative spiral being. So you can watch me for a second and just follow me as you wish. Oh, sorry. I was Again, I'm doing this with deep listening to my own rhythms. Just take your time in a little bit of open attention. Appreciating how these varietal movements can support resiliency. Support our response to life, this being comfortable with all these shifts and changings as a great creative act. I like to call it the joie de vie of the embryo. When you can, I'm just going to continue here. So we have the midline and we have this notochord that's emerged that we're developing all from. So the notochord's the cellular wrapping around the bioelectric field, as I've mentioned. What's good to know about the notochord is it's a long, well, they say rod-like structure. It's very hard to really call it that, but it develops dorsal to the gut and ventral to the neural tube. And the notochord's composed primarily of a core of glycoproteins. It's encased in a sheath of collagen fibers. And what I found more fascinating is it's wound into two opposing helixes. So it's more cord-like than rod-like if we think of it as far as the complexity of the matrix that it's created from, or a reflection of. This is a little schematic of the notochord, but again, it's the center for development of the neuromuscular skeletal system. So this schematic, I won't go too in depth to it, but here's the notochord here. You can see the plates, and then you can see these folding starts to happen, and complexification also. So the neural tube starts to develop. These are actually somites will develop around here too. So everything starts to fold and roll and develop. And we'll get to the somites that start because our vertebral column starts to emerge. A lot of people say the notochord retracts or disappears. I think this is a great disservice to our intelligence. There's not anything in the human body that doesn't serve a purpose and doesn't know what it's doing. So basically, I'd like to say it's making a very intelligent choice to move into the heart of the nucleus pulposus of the disc. And that's happening at every spinal level. But it doesn't become the nucleus pulposus. It maintains itself as its own substance, actually. This diagram just shows where the disc is, and the notochord would end up here. All kinds of creatures have notochords. This is a flatworm, and they have quite a pronounced notochord for their purposes. So all the way from the tailbone, all the way up through the sphenoid, we have this notochord. And each notochord point within each segmental level acts as a center or acts as a still point. So here's our third center schematic. And it acts as a level of a still point for the segments. And each local segment's going to unfold the neurological, autonomic, somatovisceral, and visceral functions of those levels. So we have built in here into our vertebral body, which I don't like to call a line because it's a waveform, and it's actually a complex waveform that has consolidated into space and time for our purposes. A lot of them we don't know, is what Continuum would say. This drawing is not of a human embryo, it's another creature, but it's just showing schematically, again, we've got the notochord here and the somites, and it shows you how globally the impact of each of these levels is as it creates. So this is a embryo with the somites forming. There's this segmentation that happens to create the vertebra we've been exploring. So it's the segmentation occurring in embryonic development. And the somites turn into the vertebra, all happening around the notochordal midline, which is underneath this right now. We can't see it, but just to navigate, this would be occipital 1. So up here we have the head folding and everything starting to develop, and our caudal end, everything happening here. And then there's the connecting stalk to our mothers still. And most likely, it's not brought up much, but being a woman, I would imagine that the wave motions within the mother are creating movement activities within the embryo. So this is a schematic also of what's happening in that other diagram. The cloacal membrane is actually our anus. The primitive streak's still there, but then we have this upward movement, if we want to call it that, of the developing spinal cord and the neural plate and all the little somites that will become our vertebra. So there's all that wrapping and waveform that's occurring, and there's a lady connecting with the center, her midline, dynamic stillness, which puts us immediate to all of life. And here's just some pictures of our vertebra. It brings a dimensionality into it. Again, a line's just a mechanical construct we use to join point A and point B, but our spines and our bodies are definitely mirroring the physics and mirroring the stillness, in that they're showing complex waveform. The bottom photo is actually DNA. So it starts small and it gets bigger and happens in many varieties of form. So this brings us to our, we've got some time to go a little deeper into this continuum exploration we're going to do here. And what we're going to do is bring O's up or down our spine, whatever feels like ease for you. And don't so much focus on, you know, if you want to be very precise and get every vertebral level, more power to you, but just get a basic sense that we're going to be bringing O's down our spinal wave. So we're going to bring the O's just like this diagram's dropping water into a little drop of water into a pond or a lake, and we're getting this spiraling. We're going to bring the O's down our vertebral body and down through our notochordal area into the stillness. And then we're going to hold our hands, and we can do it in what we sometimes conceive as three centers: our pelvic region, our solar plexus, and our heart. The next part of the exploration and dive, we're going to be holding our hands on our pelvis and doing puffed O's outward like the rings of water from our pelvic diaphragm, and then from our regular diaphragm, circles of water, and then out from our heart, the puffed O's out. And then we're going to finish off with the sh sound, and we're going to think of ourselves moving like this wrapping ribbon, like moving like kelp. If you're a piece of kelp, you're not really aligned. The water starts moving you and you become this spiraling, moving jelly-like substance in the bottom of the ocean, being moved by all of the fluids. So I'll just go through the sequence so you can have it marked out for you, and then we'll do it all at our own pace. My hands are coming up here, so I'm just coming out of the share, but I'm going to be dropping the O's down my spine, so it'll look like this. You don't have to use your hands. I'm just pointing to what I'm doing. Those O's are mirroring the shape of my vertebral segments, actually, and my discs. I'll be dropping them all the way down to my spine. And then I'll be coming to my pelvic region when I'm done. And I'll be feeling into my pelvis and then feeling into my spine at this segmental level. I'm taking a few segments at once, but I can be a generalist. So we puff O out. And then we'll come to our diaphragm and we'll do the same. And then we'll come to our heart. Feeling all that yummy, yummy potency. And then the last part of three is the spine, like with the kelp waves. So if that's clear to everybody, we can start at our own pace. I'll start off, and you can join me when you feel ready. Sending those O's into my vertebra. Feeling my sensorium come alive in a creative way. You can just take some time and open attention, listening deeply. Just take your time as you emerge from this space and keep soft eyes as you open. So, just to wrap this up, the original midline is the organizing center of life. It's not affected by conditional forces. And this is important to understand. All the other midlines can lesion. So it's best when we're listening to do our best to listen to that stillness and listen to that wholeness whenever we're holding in our awareness all the other midlines. So it's accessing our personal connection to dynamic stillness. The original midline supports us to navigate the many challenges and changes in life, because dynamic stillness is at the heart of self-agency. Dynamic stillness is fluidity, the formless orchestrating form. It's the undivided wholeness in flowing movement. It's the breath of life. It's important to avoid concretizing our understandings of where, how, or what accessing our midline means, or what it even looks like. Yes, there's centers within the body we can name that act as organizing centers in a very physical sense, but we arose from the dynamic stillness, so all of our being has access in many ways. So dynamic stillness is omnipresent and orchestrates all of life, including our whole being, so we can access that anytime, anywhere within ourselves that it feels easily available. And how that informs each person is an absolute unique expression. And so that's basically, it's all rainbows at some point. It's a midline of some description also, isn't it, a rainbow? So just to go over the resource pages, I took a lot of the information from Blechschmidt, the book, The Ontogenetic Basis of Human Anatomy. It's a biodynamic approach to development from conception to birth. And it was originally written by Erich Blechschmidt, but it's edited and translated by Professor Brian Freeman. I also got some of Brian Freeman's quotes from the video discs, Human Embryology from a Biodynamic Perspective, or my David Bohm's from Wholeness in the Implicit Order. The midline number 1 is a tape from Dr. James Jealous. That's very good about the midline. It's a lovely talk. The totipotency information came from Mary Ann Liebert, talking about stem cells. There's some misinformation out there about totipotency and stem cells, but the embryo, the ovum is totipotent and stem cells are actually pluripotent. So there's just some distinctions. And some anatomy I pulled from University of Michigan. If you're interested in a lot of the Blechschmidt work, Christopher Mary Louise Mueller at Books and Bones has that available, so contact him at any time. He's got a lot of books and models that are great resources, and I trained with the Muellers originally, and they're good friends of mine. If you have any information or want to ask questions or engage with me, I can be emailed and I answer pretty regularly. I do my best. It's Prue at bodyofwonder.com. My website's bodyofwonder.com. If you're interested in anything to do with Continuum, I have involvement with Watermark Arts that marries Continuum and somatic movement with art. And my colleague Elaine Calandria, it's her baby actually that I help with, but I did write an article that originally appeared with the association, The Artistry of Water, and we've created a print edition of the journals. There's 4 editions, but the artistry of water combines craniosacral with continuum and creativity. I think we've got 5 minutes, and I was wondering if anyone just wanted to put into the chat a few words of anything they discovered today in the presentation. That would be fun. Just look at the chats. I think I've got.
Thanks, Prue. That was really wonderful.
Yeah.
So in the chat it says, "Thanks, Prue, for your knowledge and new perspectives. For myself, the ocean rhythms really came clear in my body, and it was lovely to recognize and feel safe and familiar with."
Thanks, Gail. I just wanted to thank you all for turning out for the association and this lovely conference, and also for being such wonderful practitioners too. So, yeah.
Paula says, "Great opportunity to reconnect with Continuum." And someone else says, "This was my first introduction to Continuum. Thank you. I loved it."
Wonderful. It's good work. It's a very good practice for practitioners. It helps us develop and resource ourselves. So it really does inform craniosacral really well. It's supportive of us.
And someone else says, "Thank you for this most moving experience."
You're welcome. I'll have to apologize. I have the camera right where my chat's showing up. So I'm looking around.
Okay, that's what I'm here for.
Yeah. Thanks, Jen. Well, anyway, so I hope you all have a lovely conference and continue to explore and get much from the conference. And take good care, and thanks for joining me today.